What up, Cavs Nation? I'm your host, Ethan Sands, and I'm back with another episode of the Watch and Go Talk podcast. And joining me today, none other, the man, the myth, the legend, the Cavs beat reporter for cleveland.com, Chris Fedor. And Chris, we are coming to the listeners today with probably what the Cavs fans have been waiting for most since the offseason. Darius Garland is potentially going to make his return against the Philadelphia 76ers on Wednesday, as he has been upgraded to questionable after toe surgery earlier this offseason, as well as Jared Allen and Sam Merrill are also questionable for the contest. They will likely all be game time decisions, and Kenny Atkinson, if asked before the game, I'm just guessing, is going to say they'll go through warm-ups and we'll see what happens from there. But Chris, this is probably the most we've heard about Darius Garland, other than him being sent to assignment for the G League to work with the Cleveland Charge and begin this ramp up. And of course, we talked all offseason about the potential for him to come back around November, not necessarily knowing when that would be, but he didn't even miss 10 games if he were to make his appearance, his season debut on Wednesday. What do you think about how he was able to recover from toe surgery, and then also knowing that he was able to come back in such a quick fashion?
Yeah, I think credit to him, the way that he attacked the rehab, the things that he did to get himself ready. You know, a lot of signs have been pointing to this, Ethan. He's not only participating in stuff with the G League Cleveland Charge, but pregame warm-up sessions. He's been doing those things. He's been participating in the team portion of shoot-arounds, whether it's been at home, on the road, staying after practice, getting there early. I don't sense that he's overdoing it in any sort of way. I think he's doing the rehab the way that he should be. I think he's increasing the activity the way that he should, and there are steps in this recovery process. There are always steps in any recovery process, and you know, as he continues to get over each hurdle, the training staff has been happy about the progress that he has made, about how his toe is responding, about the conditioning that he's been able to do behind the scenes. So all of those things have it feeling like he's ready to play in a meaningful game. Now, we've talked about this a number of different times, Ethan. There's a difference between being healthy enough to play and effective. And this is going to be a process still for Darius. Part of his recovery process is playing in meaningful NBA games, increasing the activity, increasing the intensity, increasing the physicality, the stop-start, the change of direction, all of that kind of stuff. How does his toe respond to that? How does his toe respond to 25 to 30 minutes if that's what he's going to get? So all of this stuff is kind of wait and see. And Kenny Atkinson even said earlier today, Ethan, it's a feel-out process. I've got to figure out, okay, how much am I going to play Darius? Is he going to raise his hand and ask out? We don't want to overdo it. It's only November. All those things are going to be taken into account. But the positive signs are every single time he has added something else to the recovery process, his body and his toe has responded the way that the Cavs have been hoping that it would, and obviously the way that Darius has been hoping it would, because he loves to play, he wants to be out there, and he's been pushing behind the scenes, saying, hey, look at all the things that I can do behind the scenes. Give me the green light, and let's see what happens here.
And you mentioned that green light, Chris, and we heard that a couple of times in today's practice press conference with Kenny Atkinson, and simply saying that it's not necessarily his decision. Like, they have to hear from the sports science team, they have to hear from the health team, they have to get clearance for Darius Garland to go. Because as much as Darius Garland has been running around at shoot around in practice or before games, getting shots up and just hanging out with fans and interacting and inching towards this return, there's still, as you mentioned, the concern about just ramp up and where he's going to be at effective wise, because we know when Darius Garland wants to come back, he's going to want to have a pivotal role on this team, and it's going to deter him maybe slightly if his shot or his motion or his movement isn't back to the capability or the level and the standard that he's used to. And I think that's something that Cavs fans will also have to give early growing pains to as we continue to use that word throughout the early part of the season.
I'm just telling you right now, tomorrow night's post game, if Darius makes his official debut tomorrow against Philadelphia, tomorrow night's post game, Donovan Mitchell is going to say something along the lines of, I don't care how many points he scores. I don't care how many shots he missed. I don't care about any of that stuff. Darius Garland is back. He's on the floor. He's making a difference. He's making an impact. He's causing attention. He's causing chaos. The way that I'm guarded is going to be different. The way that some of these other guys are going to be guarded, that's going to be different, because that's the kind of impact that Darius can have. That's the kind of effect that he has on this offense, and in turn, the kind of effect that he has on the opposing defense. So mark my words, there is going to be a quote from Donovan Mitchell tomorrow night, if Darius plays, about him saying something along the lines of, I don't care how much he scores. I don't care about the missed shots. I don't care about any of this stuff. Darius Garland has recovered from this toe surgery. He's back on the floor, and we're a better team because of it.
And Chris, I just want to get into this very quickly, because Kenny Atkinson said if he does make his return, that he would not confirm or deny that. He did say if he does come back, it's not going to be, he's going to play 32 minutes in his first night back. But is he going to play 20 minutes? Maybe not, right? Because they still believe in the conditioning, the ramp-up process that he underwent to get back to this point. So what do you think? Is it going to be like 25 to 28 if he comes back?
I think it's going to be between 24 and 28. I'd be really, really surprised if it crept over 28. That's kind of the number that the Cavs have in mind when it comes to Lonzo Ball, in terms of managing his knee, in terms of just getting him through the entirety of this regular season as healthy as possible, and hopefully, for their sake, as fresh as possible going into the playoffs. So for Darius, given the fact that he didn't have any preseason, he didn't have any training camp, this isn't a situation where you just put him out there for 12 minutes or 15 minutes, one stint in the first half and one stint in the second half. That doesn't do anything for Darius, and that doesn't do anything for the Cavs. But I think somewhere between 24 and 28 is about right. If you're talking about a 4-quarter game, that's about 6-minute bursts each time. And then you kind of give yourself a couple of minutes as a buffer if you want him on the floor closing the game. So I think that's kind of the way that the Cavs are looking at this, at least initially, when it comes to Darius.
And Chris, you talked a little bit about just Evan Mobley, Donovan Mitchell, and how they're going to be affected when Darius Garland comes back. And I just wanted to ask you about that. Do you think Darius Garland's return shifts the mental load for these two players who have had a lot of the usage percentage, a lot of the usage when it comes to this start of the season? Not just touches necessarily, but decision-making responsibility. Like, does Darius Garland restore balance to this offense or this team? Because he could be the missing engine of the offense.
I think the whole thing with getting Evan more involved, getting Evan more comfortable, it's just a way for the Cavs to have more pathways to success on the offensive end of the floor. So that if they get into a situation like last year in the playoffs against Indiana, where the Pacers guards were pressing Donovan Mitchell, or they were pressuring Darius Garland, and they were taking the Cavs out of their offensive rhythm and out of their offensive flow, they really didn't have too many other places where they felt like they could go. Because during the regular season, their offense was what it was. The featured guys were who they were. So I think the whole idea behind the Evan Mobley as more of a focal point, Evan Mobley as more of a number one option, was, okay, things are going to happen throughout the course of a regular season, or things are going to happen throughout the course of a playoff series. We want to have had experience with Evan as the focal point, so that when we get into a situation and teams are taking Donovan out of the equation, or trying to take Donovan out of the equation, trying to make him as uncomfortable as possible out on the perimeter at the point of attack, and the same thing with Darius Garland, it's not going to be a foreign concept to go away from that and go to something else. You know what I mean? So as many ways that you can diversify an offense, the better off you're going to be. And you need to do it during the regular season so that guys know what to do when that happens, so that the team as a whole knows what to do when that happens, and so that guys like have been through that. So if they have to go that direction, they're going to be comfortable in those kinds of situations. But when it comes to Darius, Ethan, like making him a decoy, what does that do? Darius Garland is an elite offensive player. Darius Garland makes this team makes this team capable of being a consistently elite offensive machine. I mean, if you look at the team's numbers last year, with and without Darius Garland, when he was on the floor last year, the Cavs had an offensive rating of about 124. When he was off the floor, the Cavs had an offensive rating of 115. And that's with Ty Jerome on the roster, by the way. The non-Darius minutes were kind of Ty Jerome-like minutes. So that just tells you the kind of effect that Darius has on this offense, and then the way that he raises the ceiling of this offense because of his playmaking, because of his passing, because of his ability to break down defenders. Kenny Atkinson termed it earlier today. He creates an advantage for us on the offensive end. The more guys that you have that can create an advantage, Darius now, Donovan now, Evan Mobley now, maybe DeAndre Hunter, it just puts the defense in a different kind of bind. So I do think that Darius is going to be a high usage guy. I do think that Darius is going to be very involved in the Cavs offensive attack. You know why? Because it's successful when that happens. Because Darius is an elite offensive player. He's an elite pick and roll player. And because it benefits the offense to have Darius used that kind of way. Yeah, there are going to be times where he's playing off the ball, and there are going to be times where he's more of a decoy, and the Cavs don't want to throw too much on him too soon. But the best thing that he brings to this offense, you have to take advantage of that. And the way to take advantage of that, the way to capitalize on that, is to give him the ball and let him do his thing. Let him do what makes him special. And I don't think the Cavs are going to shy away from that just because there's this point of emphasis to make Evan Mobley more of a focal point. I think there's enough room within this offensive structure to have Donovan Mitchell a focal point at times, Darius Garland a focal point at times, and Evan Mobley a focal point at times. I think they're all going to be high usage guys, and it's just finding a way to blend all of that together and make it similar to the offensive machine that we saw last year.
A lot of people can turn to his shot as what the Cavs might have missed most, right? And obviously, Darius Garland was on the cusp of 50, 40, 90 at points last season, which is phenomenal. But the pull-up three, the floater, the scoring, sure, that's all nice. But, like, that's not where his biggest value is going to show up right away. And that's part of the reason why this Cavs team was so cautious in his return. And that's also why Darius Garland was so intentional about how he went about his recovery process. He actually knew what it felt like to be hampered, to play through a turf toe in the playoffs. And to me, it feels like he never wants that feeling again. And why would you? But what Cleveland missed the most is his pace control and his ability to bend defenses in the half court.
Right.
And obviously, there's different structures to how that operates. But Chris, when we talk about this offense and what it's been able to accomplish to the beginning of the season, which obviously hasn't been much, the majority of the success has come in the flow of the offense when Lonzo Ball or Donovan Mitchell are initiating in transition and getting the ball ahead, which is what Kenny Atkinson has relied on. But with Darius Garland, there's added element of you don't have to force feed Donovan Mitchell or Evan Mobley or DeAndre Hunter in the half court. It's more so let the ball flow again. And I think it's going to be fun to watch because of the rotations that could change or how Kenny Atkinson is going to operate with Lonzo Ball and Darius Garland potentially being on the floor at the same time, especially because you understand now that Lonzo can guard some of the players that would have readily attacked Darius Garland in previous seasons. But I want to get your thoughts on, with Lonzo Ball pushing the pace and in creating early clock opportunities, how does Darius Garland's court tempo, half court tempo, and ability to manipulate pick and roll angles actually complement that, because we could see more layering. Darius Garland could be setting up second actions after Lonzo's early offense. How that all kind of ties into what the Cavs and what Kenny Atkinson had planned for this team coming into the season.
Yeah, I mean, I think anytime you talk about somebody with the offensive skill set of Darius, you're talking about an addition. I think there are going to be times where it might be a little bit clunky and it might be a foreign concept to Darius to play alongside certain guys because some of these guys are new. Some of these rotations and lineups are going to be different, but I don't have too many questions about how he's going to blend into this offense or what he's going to mean to this offense. And I don't think the Cavs have too many concerns about it either, Ethan. I think they're looking at the positives. Point blank, it's only 7 games into the season. It's only early November. This isn't the time of year where you really dig into numbers and you feel like those numbers are going to tell you the entire story or even a story. But I think it's fair to point out in the first 7 games, the Cavs have had one of the worst offenses in the entire NBA. It's not like they've had this meat grinder schedule in terms of opponents that they've played against, right? I mean, you can score against the Milwaukee Bucks. Teams do it all the time. I think the Raptors have put up close to 100 points through 3 quarters against Milwaukee's defense tonight. So that's not the Oklahoma City Thunder. So if you go down through the list of teams that the Cavs have played against, this version of the Boston Celtics, right? The New York Knicks, not the same kind of formidable foe on the defensive end of the floor because they no longer have Tom Thibodeau. They didn't have Mitchell Robinson for that game, and all these different factors. So the point is, the Cavs haven't played against a meat grinder schedule. And through 7 games, they've been one of the worst offenses in the NBA. On the level of the Washington Wizards in terms of just efficiency, offensive rating, sheer numbers. And it doesn't mean that they have done everything poor on the offensive end of the floor. Like, there have been glimpses of that thrilling offense that we watched for 82 games during the regular season last year, where the ball is popping, where bodies are moving, where different guys are touching it throughout the course of one possession, where they're pushing the pace, getting it up ahead in transition. You can feel the impact of Lonzo Ball, right? You mentioned his hit-ahead passing, his ability to control the pace, his ability to see things 2 steps before they actually happen, and his teammates trying to get adjusted to that. Like, there have been little flashes of that throughout the course of these 7 games, but it just hasn't looked like a complete picture. And I think part of that is because of what's missing. Max missing is a big deal for this offense. Darius Garland missing is a big deal for this offense. Not having Ty Jerome the way that the Cavs did last year, that's a big deal for this offense. He single-handedly shifted games for them last year in the regular season. He single-handedly won games that they probably should have lost in the regular season. So not having those things, it's clearly been an adjustment. But when you're talking about one of the worst offenses in the NBA and you're getting a premier offensive talent, there aren't too many things that I'm going to say about like the negative effect of Darius Garland or the potential clunkiness of Darius Garland or not fitting as seamlessly because he needs to learn Lonzo Ball or not fitting as seamlessly because Kenny Atkinson's using different lineups and rotations. Everything about Darius coming back on the offensive side of the floor, I think, is going to benefit the Cavs greatly. I think it's going to benefit Lonzo greatly, too, because there's not as much in terms of responsibility, playmaking responsibility, organizing responsibility. He can kind of be... I think what the Cavs have asked of Lonzo in the first 7 games might be a little bit more than what they were anticipating. In terms of playmaking, in terms of organizing, in terms of getting the team in their sets and stuff like that, and even in terms of a workload. So I think you take some of that responsibility from him. You take some of that responsibility from Craig Porter Jr. You take some of that responsibility from Evan Mobley. You take some of that responsibility from Donovan Mitchell and you shift it more towards Darius, and I think that can be a good thing for the Cavs.
Chris, you mentioned the offensive rating of teams. Through 7 games of the NBA season for 2025-2026, the Cavs currently rank 26 in the NBA in offensive rating, 111.3. That is just ahead of the New Orleans Pelicans, 106.8, the Indiana Pacers without Tyrese Halliburton, 106.6, the Washington Wizards, 105.5. 30th spot for offensive rating is the Dallas Mavericks at 103.6. So that's not what the Cavs want, and it's not what Darius Garland does for this offense. And as we've seen, dating back to when in 2023, right, when he was becoming the player that the Cavs knew he could be, it was apparent, but there's also stats that back that up when it comes to the on-off numbers from what Darius Garland contributes to this team. And when it comes to from 2023 to 2025, when he was on the floor, the Cavs had an offensive rating of 120.2. When he was off the floor, the Cavs had an offensive rating of 114.8. Still better than what they have now, but 114.8 would be right around the Detroit Pistons offense this season. Obviously, the true shooting goes up, the turnover percentage is better, and all these other things. But, Chris, what I'm looking forward to most of watching Darius Garland come back, if he makes his debut against the 76er, is the beauty of his game. I kind of talked about this a good amount last year, but there's almost like a musical element to it. The way he dribbles isn't just control. It's in rhythm of a song, of a melody. Each crossover, each hesitation, each shift of pace, which we talked about already, feels like a note in a song. Because you think about this is a guy who understands the artistry of the game and wants to break down his defender with flair and skill, but also like choreography and fun, because he wants to add in his celebration at the end of it. This guy and this Cavs team have missed that art form, because basketball without Darius Garland, as we talked about with Lonzo Ball, it feels different. It feels just functional, but there's not this elegance to it. And for his game, it's a blend of precision and creativity that turns possessions, again, into performances, Chris, because I do think this is a guy that loves to have fun. He's always smiling. And even though that this Cavs team might want to be a little harder, you still need someone in the locker room that's going to keep it light, even when things are going tough. And that's why I don't think Darius Garland is going to be affected as much if he struggles early on, because I think he's learned also the beauty of his game is the process of it and enjoying what comes, the good, the bad, the ugly. And that also comes from being ranked rated one of the worst players in the NBA to an all-star, with high quality analysts saying that they would rather have Darius Garland on their roster than Ja Morant as of late.
I mean, it just feels difficult for the Cavs to generate consistent quality offense. Kenny Atkinson talked about their shot quality on threes, their shot quality overall, the number of passes, the number of ISOs, like all those different things. And it just feels like there were times last year where the Cavs were obliterating opponents and they were just making it look easy. And it was free flowing. There was so much rhythm to it. And it just came naturally. It came easy. And the dynamic of Darius and Donovan, obviously, that gives you such an advantage. You can break down so many different defenses. You can put them in such a bind because of those two guys specifically. And then you add on what else the Cavs had for that roster. And in the first 7 games, Donovan has had to work so damn hard to create offense. And look, it comes easy to Donovan because that's just who Donovan is. He scored 37 the other night, made it look easy. But that's because he's such a prolific shot maker. That's because he's such a prolific scorer. It's been hard on Evan Mobley to generate consistent quality looks within the offense. It's been hard on DeAndre Hunter to generate consistent quality looks with the offense. And I think the beauty of Darius and his addition to this team when he makes his debut, and it does feel like it's going to be Wednesday against Philly, but I don't think we can say that for certain right now. The beauty of it is that it should make the Cavs not have to work as hard to generate these quality looks, to get a good shot on a given possession. Because there's just this element that he brings that bends a defense a different kind of way. It's obviously different than Craig Porter Jr. It's obviously different than Lonzo Ball. It's different than even Sam Merrill in the way that he goes about it. And I just think there's this ease that comes on the offensive end of the floor. There's this ease that comes playing alongside somebody like Darius Garland. Dean Wade feels it. I think DeAndre feels it. Evan Mobley, I think, feels it. Because all of a sudden, some of those eyeballs that are more geared towards him, they have to be looking toward Darius. There's a different level of attention that he commands from a defense. So I do think the way that Kenny Atkinson phrased it earlier today about just he has an ability to make everybody around him better just with his sheer presence. I think the Cavs are going to feel that, even though there are going to be some growing pains. And the all-star version of Darius that the Cavs got during the regular season, they're probably not going to get that until maybe toward the end of this month, a couple weeks into his return. I don't know how you really put a timeline on that necessarily. I don't know how you quantify that necessarily, but I think it's going to be easier for the Cavs on the offensive end of the floor to consistently generate quality looks. And it's about, do they have enough guys that can make the defense pay for that and cash in on those quality looks?
And Chris, I think it was strategic if Darius were to make his debut tomorrow. It would make sense because of the stretch of schedule that they have coming up.
Less travel. Yep.
And I just think there's teams where Darius Garland feels like he can manipulate different situations. And as you mentioned it, allowing Evan Mobley and Donovan Mitchell kind of to reacclimate to having Darius Garland out on the floor with them. Because as we know, they've practiced a couple of times. They've gone through 5-on-5 scrimmages, but it is different. And the Cavs have talked about this dating back to training camp. It is different going up against your own teammates and going up against full live-on competition in the NBA. And I think Darius Garland is going to recognize that when he gets back on the floor, whenever that is. But I do think it's going to be a development process and a learning curve for everybody involved, especially when you talk about players that are new to the system, including Lonzo Ball and Larry Nance Jr., who played with him before. Yeah. This is a different version of Darius Garland than when Larry Nance was first here. And if Thomas Bryant plays, he'll get that experience as well.
I mean, we talk about the guys that benefit from Darius. I think Larry can benefit greatly. Now, he's got to make shots. He hasn't done that early on. Obviously, for Larry, it's more about April than it is November. But think about if Larry's spaced out to the corner, if Larry's setting some screens for Darius, if they're running some DHO stuff, whatever the case may be, two-man game, the kind of attention that is paid to Darius is just very, very different. And that means more room, more space for Larry, more space to get off shots, more space to attack off the dribble, more space to potentially playmake out of the short roll, more space to potentially find some guys on back cuts and stuff like that from the elbow extended, whatnot. So I do think there's an element of Darius Larry that is interesting for the Cavs that they do want to explore, that I do think from a skill set standpoint, I think those two guys can play off each other really, really well.
Arguably the biggest area that Darius is going to help, which I don't know if we mentioned yet on this podcast, and I'm going to say it before we get out of here, is touching the paint.
Yeah.
Getting some paint touches. And we talked about breaking down defenses, but being able to get into the painted area and then having the decision-making skills to decide where the ball needs to be and whether he has an optimal perspective of scoring the ball or finding a better look. That's something that Darius Garland is so elite at, and the Cavs have missed dearly, as we talked about on the podcast, and their lack of drives and their lack of free throws and all of these things because of where Darius Garland hasn't been and obviously what he's going to bring when he comes back. But with all that being said, that'll wrap up today's episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. But remember to become a Cavs insider and interact with Chris, me, and Jimmy by subscribing to Subtext. This is where you can send in your weekly Hey Chris questions or find out firsthand if Darius Garland is going to suit up Wednesday night. But the only way to do so is signing up for a 14-day free trial or visiting cleveland.com/Cavs and clicking on the blue bar at the top of the page. If you don't like it, that's fine. All you have to do is text the word STOP. It's easy. But we can tell you that the people who sign up stick around because this is the best way to get insider coverage on the Cavs from me, Chris, and Jimmy. This isn't just our podcast. It's your podcast. And the only way to have your voice heard is through Subtext. Y'all be safe. We out.